Chapter 2. Charleen's Grief. "That's strange," Charleen remarked, her face a mixture of mild surprise and cautious concern as her phone rang in her hand. "It's John." We both knew this was a significant call, especially because of what had happened between the two of them in the not-so-distant past. Charleen had responded privately, with great care and kindness, to some comments John had made publicly on Facebook about his gay lifestyle. It grieved her that he had replied publicly in such a harsh way. How it pained her to see him reject loving advice and to go ahead and lead a self-destructive lifestyle. We had not even expected to hear from him in an email for a long time, let alone in an actual phone call, and at this time of the night too. She answered cautiously, yet with a cheerful friendliness in her manner that had made me love her from the moment I had met her. I listened as the tone in her voice turned to dismay and watched a cloud of sorrow descend upon her beautiful face. "Oh no," she exclaimed, her voice crestfallen with grief as she began to breathe a little harder. "How did it happen?" Charleen lifted the tips of the fingers of her right hand to cover her mouth, as if that gesture would rewind time and erase the tragedy of which she now heard. After a few minutes the call ended and she approached me as I sat on our bed, looking up at her with my concerned inquiry written on my face. It was her turn to speak, and it was not going to be good. Her face saddened and crumpled into gentle tears as she shakily voiced, "It's my brother. He died yesterday." I opened my arms to her tender, breaking form and hugged her, weeping while she wept. The girls, hearing what she had said, came too, and we all embraced each other for a long time. Gavin had died very suddenly. He had finished mowing the lawn on a Tuesday afternoon at the small coastal home he had shared with his girlfriend, and had descended the steep garden stairs to enter the house and run a bath. With the water running, he had begun to feel a little unwell and had decided to lie down on the bed for a few minutes to recover from his exertions in the yard. At 49, he had begun to feel his age, his reckless past having now caught up with him. Suddenly his shouting voice had echoed through the sparsely furnished rooms he had shared with Casey, his girlfriend. Responding to his frightened cries for help, she had run from another room to his side. Looking puzzled into his face, she had not been able to understand why he had not spoken about this pain in his chest before. Now it would not pass as it had usually done in the past. After only a brief exchange of words, Gavin had died there on the bed. As our daughters and I comforted our beloved wife and mom, my mind reached back to several other dark memories that had shaken our little family. The first was the late night on which I had broken the news to her that her father had committed suicide. He had been very unhappy in his homosexual lifestyle for a long time. Earlier in the evening, he had called me, having already indulged in too many drinks, and had vented his rage against me. Out of concern for his soul, I had shared the gospel with him in a variety of ways on different occasions. Sadly, he had interpreted my words and intentions in the worst possible way and had developed a covert aggression towards me. Earlier in the evening, he had called me to vent his hostility, accusing me of judging him and neglecting to properly evaluate all of the admirable attributes of his lifestyle. He had not understood the wonder of freedom from slavery to sin, of which I had spoken, a freedom that comes through the gospel of grace. He had plugged along in drudgery for decades, and my heart had gone out for him. He had chosen, tragically, on that night, after his drunken rant on the phone, to terminate his own life. Charleen had already been in bed, asleep, when the call had come through. How sad it had been on that night too, to approach my sweet wife who lay waiting for me in bed, and to have to confront her with such a tragic reality. Another memory that came to mind that night as we comforted Charleen at the news of the death of her final remaining relative was the day on which her own mom had died. I had been busy in the workshop on the farm while Charleen had been inside the house calling the local hospital. We had taken her mother to the hospital for what had seemed to be a minor ailment. In response to Charleen's innocent, hopeful inquiry, a nurse in the hospital had bluntly informed her that her mom had died during the night. Stunned and shocked, Charleen had come out to the workshop to tell us the news. How my heart had gone out to her as the tears ran down her face, yearning to absorb the pain for her. She had been very close to her mother, and over the years, she had felt the pain of loss very deeply. The year before Charleen's mother had died, I had planned a special weekend away for our 11th wedding anniversary. It had been a surprise for her. I had made a very sneaky arrangement through my sister Jean and had taken my beloved wife to our hotel near White River, a very scenic part of the country. On the second and final morning, Charleen and I had been enjoying our breakfast together in a delightful setting when my phone had rung. Charleen had answered. The expression on her face changed from one of grateful contentment to pain, shock, and confusion. Our eyes had locked into each other as she stared at me, as if conjuring any possibility to avoid telling me what she had just heard. "It's Wayne," she had eventually squeezed out, obviously still trying to evaluate what she had heard. That morning, he had not woken up. Wayne was my eldest brother. He had died in his sleep at the age of 37, without any prior evidence of failing health. In tears, we had finished our breakfast and driven the 4 hours back to Pretoria to be with Tanya, his devastated widow, and with his 2 grieving daughters. Grief has a way of accumulating all past hurts into a pile and then dumping them on you again with every new personal calamity. As the girls and I comforted Charleen that night at the news of the death of her brother, the unspoken impact of all of these past assaults and all they meant to us lay heavily over our little family. We embraced one another for a long time, understanding something of the pain that would be there for a very long time. There was nothing we could do to take it away. We had learned that from experience.